There is a question burning in the mind of every serious XRP and Stellar holder right now, and almost nobody on mainstream financial television has the courage, or the clearance, to answer it honestly. Why is the most powerful, most secretive, most systemically important financial entity in the United States, an organization that quietly settles $4 quadrillion in trades every single year, suddenly, publicly, and without hesitation announcing that it is rebuilding itself on blockchain rails? Let me pull back the curtain on something the mainstream missed entirely. While retail investors were arguing about red candles and short-term price action, the CEO of the DTCC walked up to a microphone and quietly admitted that the bridge between traditional finance and decentralized finance is not coming someday. It is being switched on. The plumbing of the old world is being ripped out, and the rails being installed underneath your bank account, your 401k, and your brokerage portfolio have names attached to them. Names you already own. What I am about to walk you through is not speculation. It is the design document for the next financial system, hiding in plain sight. Today we decode the DTCC's tokenization announcement. Not the headline, but the architecture beneath it. Before we go under the surface, this is not financial advice. This is structural analysis. In this briefing, we examine why this single announcement quietly validates a thesis we have been building for years, and why the next 18 months may represent the final accessible window for ordinary investors to position themselves in front of the largest capital migration in modern financial history. Let's jump in. Let's start with the hard truth. Roughly 95% of retail investors are staring at the wrong screen. They are watching candles. They are watching Twitter sentiment. They are watching influencer drama. Meanwhile, the actual machinery of global finance is being rewired underneath them, and they cannot see it because they do not understand what the DTCC is or what it does. So, let me explain it the way it should have been explained to you years ago. The Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation is not a bank. It is not a broker. It is not an exchange. It is the central nervous system of the United States equity market. Every share of Apple you have ever owned, every ETF in your retirement account, every bond settlement between major institutions, it all passes through the DTCC. They are, in their own words, the sole provider of post-trade infrastructure in the United States. There is no competitor. There is no alternative. There is only the DTCC. And this organization just announced, on the record, in front of cameras, that beginning in the second half of 2026, they will operate a tokenization service that supports the digital issuance of Russell 1000 ETFs and other liquid assets. They confirmed these tokenized assets will carry the same legal investor protections as traditional book entry securities. And they confirmed, and this is the line that should have made every serious analyst sit up straight, that they expect a multi-ledger world. A multi-ledger world. Read that again. That phrase is not casual. That is the DTCC publicly acknowledging that the future of US capital markets will not run on a single proprietary system. It will run across multiple public blockchains, connected by interoperability layers, settled with bridge assets, and governed by compliance-first architecture. Now ask yourself the question retail never asks. Of the thousands of blockchains in existence, how many were architected from day one with built-in compliance primitives, regulatory-grade controls, sub-5-second settlement, and native bridging capability for cross-network asset mobility? The list is brutally short. The XRP Ledger. Stellar. Maybe one or two others depending on how you define institutional readiness. This isn't coincidence. This is design. The DTCC is not picking favorites because it likes the logos. It is selecting the only networks that meet the regulatory and operational bar required to carry quadrillions of dollars of regulated securities without breaking. Now let's do the math that the retail crowd refuses to engage with. The DTCC settles approximately $4 quadrillion annually in US trades. That is 15 zeros. To put that in human terms, it is roughly 40 times the size of global GDP every single year, flowing through one organization's pipes. Layer on top of that the global tokenization wave. Boston Consulting Group projects $16 trillion in tokenized assets by 2030. McKinsey is more conservative at $4 trillion. Standard Chartered is more aggressive at $30 trillion. Pick your number. It does not matter which estimate you choose. Every single forecast represents a multi-trillion-dollar migration onto public blockchain infrastructure within this decade. Here's the math retail ignores. If even 1% of DTCC's annual settlement volume eventually touches tokenized rails, not all of it, just 1%, that is $40 trillion of activity flowing through public ledgers per year. If the bridge assets facilitating cross-ledger settlement capture even a fraction of a basis point of that flow as utility demand, the velocity-driven demand pressure on a fixed supply asset like XRP becomes mathematically incompatible with current valuations. Think about XRP's structure. 100 billion total supply. Fixed, capped, roughly 57 billion circulating. Escrow releases of 1 billion monthly, the vast majority of which is consistently relocked. The XRP ledger burns a small amount of XRP with every transaction, a deflationary pressure that compounds as institutional volume scales. Now Stellar. 50 billion total supply, with the Stellar Development Foundation having burned roughly half of the original supply years ago, a fact most retail investors have completely forgotten. Built specifically for cross-border, asset issuance, and tokenization use cases, already operational with major partners including MoneyGram, Franklin Templeton's on-chain U.S. government money fund, and now confirmed integration paths into the DTCC's emerging architecture. These are not meme coins. These are compliance-native settlement networks with verifiable institutional adoption and mathematically constrained supply. This isn't a prediction. This is a requirement. If trillions of dollars of regulated securities migrate onto public blockchain rails, and the DTCC has now confirmed that they will, the bridge assets connecting those rails cannot remain priced as speculative retail tokens. The math does not work. The valuation gap between current price and required liquidity capacity must close. It is not a question of if, it is a question of when and how violently. While retail investors are panic selling because of a red week, the institutional signal has never been louder. Look at the evidence. The DTCC CEO did not give a vague speech. She named specific products, specific dates, and specific architecture. She confirmed an app chain launching this year for collateral mobility. She confirmed the second half of 2026 launch of tokenized Russell 1000 ETFs. She confirmed that the DTCC is actively working with multiple ledger providers because a multi-ledger world is the explicit roadmap. Layer that on top of what we already know. Chainlink integration with the DTCC's Smart NAV pilot confirmed years ago. Stellar's confirmed role in institutional asset issuance with Franklin Templeton and others. Ripple's acquisition of Hidden Road for over $1 billion, turning Ripple into a prime broker. Ripple's acquisition of Standard Custody and Medico. The expansion of RLUSD as a regulated stablecoin under New York DFS oversight. Japan's FSA framework for digital asset adoption. The SEC under Paul Atkins openly stating that tokenized securities are inevitable, that T0 settlement is the destination, and that the United States must embrace this transition or fall behind. Ask yourself the brutal question. Does an organization that processes $4 quadrillion annually announce a public roadmap without absolute legal, regulatory, and technical certainty? Does the SEC publicly endorse on-chain settlement without the rails already being chosen? Does BNY Mellon, the world's largest custodian, quietly slot two specific digital assets into a special category on their internal classification documents without strategic intent? The answer to all three questions is the same. They do not gamble. They position. This is not retail FOMO. This is calculated multi-year positioning by the most conservative, most compliance-obsessed institutions on Earth. And they are positioning around a specific set of public blockchains, the ones architected for compliance, throughput, and bridging. You already know which ones. Now let's map the catalyst. Specific dates, specific events, specific consequences. June 2026. The National Securities Clearing Corporation begins 24/5 operations, Sunday 8 p.m. through Friday 8 p.m. Eastern, pending final regulatory approval. This is the first structural step toward the 24/7 trading reality that blockchain rails make natively possible. Second half of 2026. The DTCC's tokenization service goes live, supporting Russell 1000 ETFs and additional liquid assets with full investor protections. This is not a pilot. This is production infrastructure. Throughout 2026, continued expansion of spot ETF products across major digital assets, with XRP spot ETFs now actively trading and Solana products following close behind. Each new ETF approval represents a fresh institutional accumulation channel. 2026 through 2028. Gradual migration of overnight equity volume from 1% toward 10% of total daily volume. Every percentage point representing additional pressure on settlement infrastructure that traditional T+1 systems cannot accommodate. Blockchain settlement is not optional at scale. It is mandatory. Ongoing. The Digital Asset Market Clarity Act and parallel legislative efforts continue moving through Congress, removing the final regulatory ambiguity that has kept trillions of dollars of institutional capital on the sidelines. When that final clarity arrives, and it is arriving, not someday, but in measured quarters, the wait-and-see money becomes all-in money. The risk premium that has suppressed bridge asset valuations for years vanishes overnight, and the gap between current price and required institutional valuation closes with violence. The fuse is lit. The countdown is no longer abstract. It is a calendar. We are moving from an era of abundance into an era of scarcity, and most retail investors will not understand what happened until they cannot afford to participate. Here is what scarcity looks like in practice. When the DTCC's tokenization service goes live and institutions begin routing meaningful volume across XRP Ledger and Stellar settlement rails, the bridge assets required to facilitate that volume will not be acquired through retail exchanges. They will be acquired through OTC desks, through prime brokers like the newly integrated Ripple Prime, through institutional custody arrangements, and through direct relationships invisible to anyone watching CoinMarketCap. Once those tokens enter multi-signature institutional vaults, once they are locked into collateral pools, settlement reserves, and tokenized treasury management strategies, they do not come back to the retail market for a 10% profit. They are gone, removed from circulating supply, permanently illiquid from a retail perspective. Exchange reserves for XRP have already been trending toward multi-year lows. Stellar reserves on major exchanges are similarly compressed. This is not random. This is accumulation in slow motion, executed by entities that understand exactly what is about to be plugged in. And here's the part nobody wants to hear. When the final switch is flipped, when the DTCC infrastructure goes live, when the SEC clarity arrives, when the ETF flows compound, when the multi-ledger world becomes the default reality, the retail entry window does not close gradually. It closes in a gap. The kind of price discovery event where one Friday's close looks nothing like Monday's open. The institutions have spent years trying to shake retail loose so they could acquire the position. The boring sideways action, the painful drawdowns, the endless FUD cycles, these are not accidents. They are features of an accumulation phase, the doors closing fast. Not because anyone is trying to be dramatic, because the math of supply removal in a fixed cap network is unforgiving once institutional demand activates. I know it has been hard. I know the headlines create noise. I know that watching XLM rip 40% in a week while you wait on XRP, or watching XRP rip while you wait on something else, creates emotional pressure to constantly rotate, constantly second guess, constantly chase. But as an analyst, I am trained to distinguish between noise and signal. And the signal right now is the loudest it has been in a decade. The signal is a $4 quadrillion settlement organization, publicly committing to blockchain rails. The signal is the SEC's chairman openly stating that tokenization is the future, and that T0 settlement is the destination. The signal is BlackRock, Franklin Templeton, JP Morgan, BNY Mellon, and Morgan Stanley all building infrastructure that converges on the same handful of public ledgers. The signal is Ripple becoming a prime broker. The signal is Stellar's footprint inside Franklin Templeton's tokenized money market fund. The signal is every major regulated financial institution on Earth positioning around the same architectural conclusion. The noise is everything else. Being early feels exactly like being wrong, right up until the moment reality catches up. Most retail investors will not have the patience, the conviction, or the context to remain positioned through the final phase of accumulation. That is by design. The system is built to transfer assets from impatient hands to patient hands, from confused capital to informed capital. The question is not whether the bridge gets built. The DTCC just confirmed that it is being built. The question is who is still holding the bridge assets when institutional demand finally activates the rails. Let me leave you with the core thesis in one sentence. Price is a distraction. Architecture is the reality. The DTCC just told the world, calmly, on the record, with named products and named dates, that the bridge between traditional finance and decentralized finance is operational, regulated, and being switched on inside the next 18 months. They told us they expect a multi-ledger world. They told us they are building interoperability infrastructure right now. And they told us this is the beginning of a transformation that will define the next 50 years of capital markets. If you are still here, still studying, still positioning while the rest of the market is distracted, you are not late. You are exactly where the informed minority always stands at this phase of every major capital migration, quietly accumulating while the crowd argues about the wrong things. Comment multi-ledger world below if you made it to the end. I want to see who is actually paying attention to what the DTCC said versus what the headline said. If you value this kind of structural analysis over hype-driven content, subscribe and stay close. We are entering the most consequential 18-month window this market has ever seen, and the analysis is going to matter more, not less. Stay patient, stay rational, stay positioned. In a market fueled by emotion and noise, we thrive on data and composure. The math doesn't lie, the architecture is being built in the open, and the system is almost complete.